Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into my Wednesday edition on my YouTube channel. As everybody knows, this is where I'm going to be doing the starts and sits for week 2 in fantasy football. So let's just go ahead and dive into today's video. Really quick note though, in case we have any first time listeners, when I do go through my starts and sits, this is more of my general feeling on either the player, the team, the matchup. After week 4, that's when I like to start looking into the data and seeing what teams are giving up the most fantasy points to said position. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my quarterback starts and sits for week 2. My start, Jalen Hurts against the 49ers. Jalen had a good opening game against the Atlanta Falcons. Now he is going against a much tougher defense, but with that being said, the 49ers did lose Jason Verrett this past week I think he tore his ACL, but either way, his season is done. So they're going to be missing their top cornerback on their roster. We saw, Jared Goff put together as far as stats wise, I wouldn't say overall play, but stats wise, Jared Goff put up a good performance against that 49ers defense. And, with the 49ers, even if they were to beat up on the Eagles this week, as we saw with the Lions, that just leads to a lot of garbage points. That leads to a lot of passing yards and potential passing touchdowns for Jalen. Jalen obviously does bring you that higher floor with his rushing ability as well. So I think Jalen's a good play this week, and he could finish as a QB1 for week 2. On my next start, it's going to be Joe Burrow against the Bears. I thought Joe showed some good things against the Vikings last week. He was able to connect with his former college teammate in their first game, Jamar Chase. I think he went over 100 yards. You saw him move the ball with T. Higgins, got Uzuma involved, and I think that's going to continue against the Bears. As we saw on Sunday night, Matthew Stafford completely torched that secondary, and that group on Chicago needs a lot of work, and I could see them struggling to defend the pass once again, and this could be a very great performance by Joe Burrow this week. Moving on to my sit, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins. For my sit against the Cardinals, Kirk did perform pretty well last week as far as fantasy numbers, and that maybe could continue this week, but look what the Cardinals just did this past week. They pretty much shut down Ryan Tannehill. They were getting in his face, getting constant pressure, getting a lot of sacks. I mentioned this last night, one of my in the waiver wires talking about that game. But yeah, Chandler Jones got 5 sacks alone. And the Vikings offensive line, we'll have to see if Christian Darrisaw can make his debut. But if he's not able to play, then Chandler Jones might get another 5 sacks. And even if Darrisaw plays, you're talking about a injured rookie going into his first game against an elite edge rusher. So Chandler Jones could easily probably get 5 sacks this week. So I could see this being one of those games where it's a bad Kirk performance, where he's under duress, and everybody knows when Kirk Cousins is under duress, that's when he typically has his bad games. So I would lean away from Kirk this week. My sit is Trevor Lawrence against the Broncos. Trevor, he definitely had his opening game matchup, his first game where he learned a lot of things, that there are certain passes you can't always throw and that will turn into interceptions. And he definitely does not have an easier task against the Broncos. The Broncos have one of the best defenses in the league, arguably a top 5 defensive unit. They got a good defensive front that's going to be able to create pressure against Trevor all day. They got a really good secondary that can get those interceptions. So I could see a really rough rookie outing for Trevor. So, if you're in that if you're in a 2 quarterback league or anything like that, I would definitely stay away from Trevor Lawrence this week. So again, yeah, my start for the quarterback position is Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, and then my sits are Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence. Let's go ahead and move into the running back group. My running back my running back starts, as you can see, I got a couple pair of running backs I think you could use. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams against the Packers. Those two were heavily involved in the Lions matchup last week. And if you look at as I just talked about, the Lions were down big and they had to make a big comeback that they almost had made happen against the San Francisco 49ers. And you would think that that would mean, their wide receivers would get a lot of targets. No, it wasn't that. That wasn't that case. Outside of T.J. Hawkinson, Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift were two of their top 5 receivers on the day. So even if they were to lose big to the Packers, these guys are going to have a significant role within the offense in that passing attack. And then we also saw Alvin Kamara and Tony Jones Jr. and those Saints put up a lot of rushing yards against the Packers on Sunday. So I think DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams are a good play again this week. And if you got them, I would definitely consider putting them in your lineup. And same thing goes with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams against the Jaguars. Jaguars struggled to contain the run last week. Melvin Gordon had a really good performance. Javonte Williams, he was good in a solid, good rookie performance. But one thing that came out of it, they were 50-50 on the snaps. Now, that might be something that would worry people when it's exactly 50-50. But they're going against the Jaguars. They could easily be beating up on this team where they want to control the clock. So I could easily see Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams getting, 10 to 15 rush attempts, and then obviously their work in the passing attack as well. So I think they are both good plays for week 2. My sit of the week is, let's just go ahead and stick into that game and go to the opposite team with their pair of running backs. And that is James Robinson and Carlos Hyde against the Broncos. As I mentioned with Trevor Lawrence, the Broncos have a really good defense. I don't have to go much in detail about that like I just did with on that section. But the reason why I say James Robinson and Carlos Hyde outside the big defense, Carlos Hyde, I believe, yeah, that's right. He had more rush attempts than James Robinson last week. So that's really worrisome if you are a James Robinson owner. You want to see this situation play out. You thought when Travis Etienne went down with a season-ending injury, that would mean James Robinson would have a larger workload, and that wasn't the case this past week. Now, maybe they did get games scripted out of that matchup because the Texans went up big early. But with that being said, I want to see this situation play out before I make any moves in either of these players into my starting lineup. So until I see who's going to dominate the touches, and not only dominate the touches, but actually be effective with those touches, I would avoid playing either of those Jaguars running backs, not only for week 2, but maybe for week 3, if they don't show anything really promising this week. My other sit of the week is Mike Davis against the Bucs. I'm completely avoiding this matchup with him this week. The Bucs have one of the, arguably, I think, the best rush defense in the league, and they're going to be able to contain Mike Davis pretty easily. I think the Falcons are dealing with some injuries on their offensive line, and then you got the Bucs with Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea, JPP, Joe Tryon, Shaq Barrett, Devin White, Levante David. Yeah, that front seven's ridiculous. So if you got Mike Davis, I would definitely consider putting him on your bench for this week. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my wide receiver starts and sits. My wide receiver start this week is Jarvis Landry against the Texans. The Texans secondary is not that great. One of their guys, I believe it was, I can't forget his name, but he got hurt this week, I'm pretty sure too. So he's going to be missing this matchup. And not only that, it came out today, I want to say around the lunch hour, that OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., is not going to be playing this week. He is not ready to make his return from his torn ACL. So I expect Jarvis Landry is going to get peppered with targets going against a very weak secondary at home in Cleveland. I think he's going to want to put on a show for that crowd, for the dog pound. So if you got Jarvis Landry, I would consider sliding him into your lineup. My other start wide receiver this week, obviously you're going to play Keenan Allen. Let me say that too, guys. I'm not going to sit here and list obvious starts. I'm not going to do that. So that's why I didn't list Keenan Allen's name right there with Mike. But yeah, if you got Mike Williams, he's coming off a strong game last week against the Washington football team. And this week he's got the Cowboys, and we saw Tom Brady and their wide receivers completely torch that group last week. And then literally right before I hopped on to record this video, it came out that DeMarcus Lawrence has broken his foot. So he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. So that means their best edge rusher on Dallas's defense is not going to be playing. And the Chargers' offensive line's much improved, so they don't have a guy that's going to create consistent pressure. Well, Justin Herbert's going to have a lot more time to make plays on Sunday. So I definitely think that even increases Mike Williams' value, and I think he's a great play this week against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, looking at my sits, my sit is Brandon Aiyuk against the Eagles. This is specifically because it sounds like he is in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan. I was a big Aiyuk believer when he came out. He showed some promising things last year. He looked like he was setting up for a good solid year two. But it sounds like a nagging hamstring injury has held him back, and his coach literally called him out in his press conference and saying he needs to perform better at a consistent rate. So if you got Brandon Aiyuk, I would not drop him because I believe in that kid's talent. He's a first round pick. They're not just going to like completely throw the towel on him and give up on him as a player like they did with Dante Pettis. He's going to get a chance to shine again. It might be this week. You never know. It could be one of those things where they do all this like, oh, we're gonna like make him earn his way, and then all of a sudden they pepper him with targets and he goes off. But I don't trust that at all. Shanahan has a proven track record. If somebody's in the doghouse, he will not play them until they earn their way out of it. So at least this week, I would sit IU and then go from there. But I would anticipate he should, by the halfway point, he's going to work himself out of that doghouse and start performing well for his fantasy owners. Now, my other sit of the week, it's a little trio down there in Miami. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, and Will Fuller. You guys already know if you've been watching all my videos, I'm a big believer in Jalen Waddle. I picked him as the offensive rookie of the year. He could definitely continue his start from last week and build upon that into a good game this week. Devontae Parker showed some good things last week, but that third guy, Will Fuller, he didn't play last week. He was suspended. He is back this week. So you're talking about a trio of wide receivers, and we really don't know how this target load is going to work. A little spoiler alert, Mike Gesicki is going to be involved in that passing attack too. So we really don't know how this is going to work now that Will Fuller is in the picture. And on top of that, they are going against the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are a good, solid defense. They got a guy like Tre'Davious White that can stick on one of those three, or maybe he'll cover those three throughout the game. So this is just a thing where they're playing against a good defense. We're not sure how this target load is going to be spread out between the three. So if you can, I would leave these three on the bench. Now, just because, like, I don't know, until I see it play, but obviously if you're dealing with like a Jerry Jeudy injury or something like that and you're forced to maybe play a Jalen Waddle, or when Will Fuller's on the field, you kind of want to play him too because you never know when he's going to get hurt again. I understand that as well. Now let's go ahead and wrap this up with my starts and sits for the tight end position. Starting with the starts, Dallas Goedert against the 49ers. He caught a touchdown last week against the Falcons. He looked very solid. He looked like he's going to be probably the number 2 option in their passing attack behind Devontae Smith. I think he's going to continue to grow his role within the offense. And then last week with the 49ers, we saw TJ Hockenson completely ball out against them. I think and he got a lot of targets as well, and he was able to find the end zone. So I kind of see that translating for Dallas Goedert. And like I kind of mentioned with the start on Jalen, even if the 49ers are beating up on the Eagles, that's garbage time. That's still going to get you a lot of passing yards involved, and he can still have a chance to get you some points. Now, my other start of the week is Jared Cook against the Cowboys. Similar to why I mentioned Mike Williams, the Cowboys struggled to defend the pass. He was my waiver wire pickup on that this week. Go watch that video if you have not yet. And I think Jared Cook could be setting up for a good week, especially now with the news about DeMarcus Lawrence being out. That's going to have Herbert more time to maybe find him open. As I mentioned in my waiver wire video last week, he had 8 targets last week. He's probably going to see that amount around this matchup too, especially if they get in a shootout with the Dallas Cowboys. So I think Jared Cook is a good play at the tight end position for week 2. My sit, kind of carrying over from the wide receiver sit, Mike Gesicki against the Bills. As I mentioned, Will Fuller's coming back. Mike Gesicki didn't do as much as I thought he would last week. So if I have him, I would kind of maybe sit him on the bench and try to play somebody else like a Jared Cook if you could. And then the Bills too. They have a good man. I'm drawing a blank. Not Tremaine Edmonds. It's the other linebacker that's really good that I can't think of. He's really good in coverage, and I'm sure I'm gonna think of the name when I get off this video. But I just don't like the matchup for Mike Gesicki this week. I think he could have a very down week, so I would avoid him if you could. My other sit is Tyler Higbee against the Colts. There's this reasoning. I'm not sure what the reasoning is with there. It is kind of harder to gauge who should be sitting for a tight end at this point of the season. But last year, the Colts were one of the better fantasy defenses against the tight end position. So I'm basing off that. Bobby Okereke's there, who's really good in coverage. Darius Leonard is there as well, who's solid in coverage as well for himself. And then Tyler Higbee, to me, he had a solid week last week, right? But hasn't he always kind of been like an inconsistent fantasy tight end? He goes off one week, next week's a dud. That's what I'm thinking too with this. So that's why I put Tyler Higbee as my sit against the Colts. So yeah, those are my starts and sits for week 2 in fantasy football. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you don't hear my dog Titan back there that decided he's going to go ahead and slurp some water. So I do apologize if that's annoying at all. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button so you know anytime that my content is loaded up on my channel. And then other than that, I do want to plug the Prospect Encyclopedia. As you guys know, it's one of the projects I'm totally proud to be a part of. Go to prospectencyclopedia.com to read more about it. You can get the entire PDF for $15. If you just want to read about your one team, you can get that for $1. And you can check out the Buck section that I wrote. That section is for free. So if you want to download the Buck section, see if this is engaging content to you, you want to make the full purchase, then you can go ahead and do that. And then other than that, I will be back on Saturday when I do my full NFL Week 2 game preview video. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Other than that, I wish you luck on your fantasy matchups and enjoy this weekend of football.